everybody. I am sorry I did not post last Friday. My internet was being weird and I was really busy anyway, and I just didn't get around to it, and didn't happen. And then by the time I was like, oh crap, I never did that, it was too late. So anyway, but I'm kind of glad in some ways that I didn't, because now it gave me time to finally finish Les Miserables. I'm done with it. So that is what I'm going to be reviewing for you today. This is obviously Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, big French classic. If you have never heard of it, then you live under a rock. This was in 2 volumes. I got this from my grandfather when he passed away. It's taken me so long to read this, okay? It took me, well, it only took me a month to read volume 1, for some reason. And then it took me, 3 months, and then I read a couple books in between, and then it took me 3.5, 4 months to read this one. So, it's a long time. Anyway, so I'm just going to give you a quick little overview of what the story is about. I'm not going to go into too much detail because there's so much that happens, and honestly, I just don't feel like I can give it a proper, overview of the plot, because it's just, I'm not like an English teacher. I didn't analyze all of the whatever, but anyway, so basically, it has basically the main character that it follows throughout this entire story is Jean Valjean, and he is, he starts out as an escaped galley slave. He's, stole a loaf of bread, I think is what he did to start with, and he ended up in the galleys, and, for life, and because he kept trying to escape, he ended up being in there for life, but he escaped, and he went away to this little teensy-weensy town in France, and I also, by the way, apologize for potentially butchering people's names in here, because I'm not French. I don't speak French. I've never seen the movie or anything, so I do know that Jean Valjean is pronounced Jean Valjean. I'm pretty sure about that one, but the rest of them I'm not quite sure. But anyway, so he becomes, he lives with the bishop, and he becomes this really influential person in the town. He teaches them how to make, I think it's beads, these little beads that they manufacture. He teaches them how to make them more efficiently and cheaper, and they're prettier, they're better quality, so they sell for more. So he basically gives this town this new lease on life. And in the meantime, Fantine or Fontaine, I'm not sure how to pronounce that exactly, has come from, she was living in Paris, and she's come back to her hometown because she was basically this guy's lover, and she had a child with him. She had a little girl named Cosette, and she just ended up, and then he left her, and she ended up being, kind of stuck with this little child, and she couldn't support herself, so she ended up, she left the child with, and this is probably an example where I'm going to butcher the name, but with, is it Thénardier or Thénardier? Anyway, a family who runs an inn, in a town that she passes through. They have 2 little girls, and the mother is so attentive to her 2 little girls that she feels comfortable leaving her with the family, and she says that she'll send her money to take care of her, but she doesn't want to take Cosette to her hometown with her because she was obviously an unwed mother, and she doesn't want them to think badly of her. She goes back to her hometown, and she becomes a prostitute. She just has a really, really hard time, and she ends up dying. And her sort of last dying wish is to tell Jean Valjean to take care of her daughter, and she wanted to see her daughter. In the meantime, this was years later, in the meantime, Cosette is growing up in this family, and they're treating her like their servant. Yes, they are very, very attentive to their two beautiful little girls, who are the apple of their eye, but they're very bad people, and they just treat Cosette like crap. And anyway, Jean Valjean ends up, he gets found out. Javert, I think that's how you pronounce it. Javert ends up, he's a police officer. I think in the beginning he's just a police officer. He becomes an inspector. I don't know. Anyway, I'm sorry. It's been a while since I read the first book, so I'm not 100% sure. I should have double checked somewhere online the proper plot summary. My dog just stuck his face over this. But anyway, so he finds him, he recognizes him, and again, Jean Valjean is arrested and again escapes and runs for his life. He finds Cosette. In the meantime, he's made all of this money from, this factory that makes these beads. So he has all of this money, like, secreted away. So he basically goes and he sees how badly Cosette is being treated, and he wants to honor his last, dying promise or whatever, that he will make sure that Cosette is taken care of. So he basically buys Cosette from this guy. And then he takes her to Paris, and they hide away in a convent with these nuns. He changes his name again to Fauchelevent or something like that. I don't know. I'm sorry. And he says that he's this old the gardener at the convent takes pity on him, and so he says that he's his brother with his his little daughter. And so Cosette ends up being educated by the nuns at the convent, and so he sort of builds this new life for himself hidden away in the convent. And then after the convent is closed down, I think, he sort of as Cosette grows up, she's growing up into a beautiful young lady. They end up moving to a different place, and then comes Marius into the story, and that's probably not how you pronounce it, I'm sorry, but that's how I pronounce it in my head, so that's how I'm going to say it, Marius. And Marius is this young man who, his parents both died when he was very young, and he was raised by his grandfather, who is a very, very crotchety old man, but who deep in his heart loves Marius, but he just doesn't know how to show that affection to Marius, so he was never very nice to him. And so anyway, as soon as Marius is old enough, he's gone, he's out of there. Maybe his mother dies when he's older. I don't know. I'm sorry. I apologize. This is obviously not, the best plot summary ever, but anyway. So he leaves, he finds out that his father was, and some of this has to do with sort of the French politics, the French Revolution, the whole Napoleon thing, and I don't really know a whole lot of that. I'm not big on my French history, so I can't really explain a whole lot of that. But anyway, from what I understand, Marius' father was on the opposite side of that whole war, the rebellion against the king or something, than Marius' grandfather was, and that was sort of where they split. And Marius' father does die later on. His mother died when he was young, and his grandfather, okay, I remember now, I'm sorry. His mother died when he was little, and his grandfather kept him away from his father because he didn't like him, and because he thought that he was, just this rebel, whatever. And he had apparently been appointed a baron by Napoleon, I think. And but nobody recognized it because Napoleon had been exiled and stuff long before then. But So Marius finds out about his father, who his father really is. So he goes to visit his father, and his father is very, very sick, and his father ends up dying. And his grandfather finds out that he's been visiting his father, and he gets very, very angry about it. So Marius like runs off, and whatever. And he meets these other friends, and he's living by himself very, very poorly because he refuses his grandfather. His grandfather is very wealthy, but he refuses his grandfather's money because he just doesn't. He's angry with him. In the meantime, he is in a park, I think, when Cosette and and Jean Valjean take their a daily walk through this park, and Marius sees Cosette and thinks that she's just the most beautiful thing in the world and falls in love with her. And this plot is really getting way too long, but anyway. So they fall in love. He ends up finding out where they live, and Jean Valjean sees him, staring at Cosette, and he's very threatened by it because Cosette is his, and he wants to keep her to himself, and he doesn't want anybody to find out who he is, and he wants to kind of, not socialize. But Marius ends up finding out where Cosette lives. They end up in this little in this garden behind their house. He goes to visit her every night, and they sit and gaze into each other's eyes and are in love and blah blah blah. In the meantime, the bad, evil people who Cosette originally lived with, who Jean Valjean sort of bought, Cosette from, are also living in Paris, and actually live in the beginning they live in the same building as Marius does. And so they find out, and their daughters are of course grown up, and the oldest daughter, Eponine, I think her name is, kind of falls in love with Marius, and it's the whole tragic thing there. And then Javert, of course, has now become much higher up in the police officer hierarchy, whatever, and he also recognizes Jean Valjean and knows that he's in Paris again. So that's kind of a whole little side story, and I'm not going to go. And then there's just a whole lot of stuff that happens towards the end there that I'm not going to get into, but basically it's just kind of, continues to follow Jean Valjean in his sort of quest to kind of keep himself hidden and make sure nobody finds out who he really is, and then Marius and Cosette's little love story, and then the story with Javert still trying to get Jean Valjean, and then the bad guy Thénardier, or I think maybe that's how you pronounce it, wanting to get his revenge on Jean Valjean for taking away Cosette because he felt like he could have gotten more money out of her, is basically what he feels gypped there. He's really not a good guy. So anyway, this book is, first of all, it's a beautifully, beautifully written book. There were so many. I actually have, I don't know if I still have them in here. I should probably take them out. I have little scraps of paper throughout here where I've just written down these little quotes that I just thought were so beautiful. Oh yes, let me read you this quote. I love this quote. This is about Cosette and Marius. The power of a glance has been so abused in love romances, that it has been discredited in the end, and a writer dares hardly assert nowadays that two beings fall in love because they looked at each other. And yet that is the sole way in which people fall in love. The rest is merely the rest and comes afterwards. Nothing is more real than the mighty shocks which two souls give each other by exchanging this spark. And there was another note too about something about love that I just thought, and I don't remember what exactly it was, but I have so many little notes in here that I've just written down these little quotes because I thought they were so beautiful. And it's just, but with that being said, there are, of course, as always, the thing that I always find, not always, but most of the time find with these, old classics, is that there are parts where they just kind of lose me. There are parts when they take, you know, 5 chapters to say what they could have said in 1 chapter, and they just sort of go on and on and on and on and on, and it doesn't really, you know, I sort of start to lose what they're even talking about or why they're talking about it and what it has to do with the story. One big example of that, and I probably could have explained the whole thing with Marius's father and what happened with the French Revolution and blah 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 more, if I had actually, and I'm not even sure that's even the war that they're talking about. That's how awful this is. I don't know anything about French history, so I apologize to all of you French, you know, history buff people or people who have read this book and understand it. If I'm totally just talking about the wrong thing, I'm so sorry. Please don't be angry with me, but I just don't really know. There's like 5 chapters where they go on about the Battle of Waterloo and Napoleon and stuff, and honestly, I just kind of skipped over that because I was like, I don't know what this has to do with the story, and probably it really did have something to do with the story, and I should have read it, but I didn't feel like it did at the time. And anyway, so yeah, I thought it was a beautiful book, but I thought it was a little too long and drawn out. There were parts that I thought it could have been a little quicker about. Hi, puppy. Mwah! It's my puppy. You're cute. And so yeah, that's basically how I feel about this book. It was beautiful, it really was. And my sister, my younger sister, read this too, and she said the same thing. She said she just had to skip over some bits because it was just. And I know to all of you, you know, people who are really, really into literature and stuff, that's like a sacrilege, but I'm sorry. So that is my thoughts on Les Miserables, and I'm excited now. I don't know if you watched the Oscars. Anne Hathaway won a Best Supporting Actress Oscar for her portrayal of Fantine in Les Miserables, the movie. I have heard mixed reviews about that. Some people say it's amazing. It was nominated for a Best Picture. However, other people are like laughingly making fun of it because they said that everybody sings so badly and it's just awful. I saw especially Russell Crowe is the one thing that I've heard. Russell Crowe as Javert, they've said that he was just horrible. He sang horribly, acted horribly. But you know, they did the little group number thing at the Oscars, and I thought it was pretty good, but I'm not a, you know, theater critic, but I thought it was good. But I've never seen, you know, any play Les Miserables or, you know, the movie or anything, so I'm excited to watch that particular version. I love Hugh Jackman, I love Anne Hathaway, I love Amanda Seyfried, who plays the cassette, the grown-up cassette, so I'm excited to watch that. So there's my review. Next week, I'm reading right now a trilogy. I've already read the first book. I've just started the second book, and there's a third book as well. It's a trilogy of little, just, you know, fluff romance novels. A little better than Harlequin romance novels, but not quite much better. And I'm thinking I might be able to actually finish them by next Friday so that I can do a quick review of those for you. If not, then I'll review something else. And then I guess I have to decide which book off my 1001 books list I want to read next. I'm not quite sure. I'm thinking maybe something short because I've been reading this forever. I feel such a sense of accomplishment that I've finally finished it. Okay, so that's all. I'm done talking. Bye bye everybody, and I will see you next week.